In 1901, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished without a trace. The clock stopped. The dinner table was set. And time never moved again. This is the true story of a lighthouse where time stood still, and the chilling mystery that still haunts its windswept cliffs more than a century later. They called it Llanellan Isle, a rugged outcrop off the coast of Scotland, battered by storms and surrounded by legends. It was a place where no trees grew, where the ocean sang lullabies of shipwrecks, and where only the bravest agreed to stay. On December 7, 1901, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur took their posts as the keepers of the Llanellan Isles lighthouse. Experienced, disciplined, and well aware of the island's isolation, they knew their 3-week shift would be demanding, but nothing out of the ordinary. They carried logs, oil, and provisions across the jagged rocks. The last thing they heard from the outside world was the splash of the departing boat engine, disappearing behind mist and crashing waves. That was the last time anyone ever saw them alive. 4 days, all seemed calm. The lighthouse's beam continued to sweep the sea, its rhythmic blink a signal of safety. Passing ships logged its light in their records. It stood like a lone guardian, eternal and unbothered. Until it didn't. On December 15th, the steamship Archtor passed by and reported that the lighthouse was dark. Its great lamp, meant to shine through even the fiercest storms, was silent. 2 days passed. Then 3. By December 20th, with no response from the island, the Northern Lighthouse Board sent a supply ship. The relief crew expected 3 weary but smiling men to greet them, ready for rotation. Instead, the boat docked to silence. The door was locked. The flag was gone. And a haunting stillness clung to the air. When the relief crew broke in, they found something even more unsettling. Inside, the fireplace was cold, untouched for days. The kitchen table was set for dinner, plates half-filled, chairs pulled back. A clock on the wall had stopped, 8:45. The beds were unmade. Oilskins, heavy coats for storm weather, were missing, but only 2. The logbook lay open. The last entry, December 13th. Severe winds. Storms surrounding the island. Keeper Marshall very quiet. MacArthur crying. MacArthur crying? A hardened former soldier, known for his temper? It didn't make sense. The final entry chilled them to the bone. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. And then, nothing. No sign of struggle. No blood. No bodies. No clues. It was as if the men had simply stepped out into the wind, and vanished into thin air. The official investigation offered theories. One suggested a wave had swept them off while they tried to secure equipment during a storm. Another claimed one keeper went mad and killed the others, then threw himself off the cliffs in remorse. But none of it explained the dinner table, or the coat that was still hanging by the door, or the locked gate, or the clocks, all stopped at the same time. Locals whispered of the island curse, of strange lights in the sky, voices in the mist, and ancient tales of beings who lived beneath the sea, angry at the intruders above. In the years that followed, no concrete answer was ever found. The lighthouse was automated decades later. But fishermen still avoid the island. And every December, around the 15th, some claim to see the beam flicker, just once, as if signaling to no one. Others say you can still hear the clang of a dinner bell, from a table no one has touched since 1901. But here's the most chilling part. In 1995, a tourist boat passed near the island during a storm. A boy on board pointed and asked, "Who's that waving from the tower?" Everyone turned. The lighthouse was empty. Or, it should have been. What really happened to the keepers of Llanellan Isle? Why did time stop? And could the answer be something we were never meant to understand? 3 men gone. 1 lighthouse untouched. And time stopped dead in its tracks. The mystery of Llanellan Isle didn't end with the discovery of the empty lighthouse. In many ways that was just the beginning. The relief team, disturbed but determined, turned to the lighthouse logs, the only surviving record of what happened in the days leading up to the disappearance. At first the entries were routine. December 7th, arrival successful. Weather clear. Light operational. December 8th, standard duties. Marshall and Duckett repairing west platform. Spirits good. But then, something changed. December 12th. Storm clouds gathering. West wind rising. Waves crashing high. But strangely, no storms were recorded that day by nearby weather stations. The sea, they said, was calm. December 13th. Severe winds. Marshall very quiet. MacArthur crying. This is where it gets bizarre. MacArthur was known as a rough, aggressive man. A brawler. A drinker. a former soldier. What could reduce such a man to tears? And why was it written down so matter-of-factly? Then came the final note. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. That was the last thing ever written in the logbook. No farewell. No final report. Just quiet acceptance. And perhaps fear? But here's where things get darker. When investigators examined the island, they found ropes, heavy-duty, weather-resistant, torn from their secure hooks over 100 feet above sea level. One theory emerged. The men saw a storm coming and rushed out to tie down the supply crates. Maybe one slipped, fell, and the others tried to save him. It made sense, except for one thing. There was no storm. At least not that day. Not anywhere near Flannan Isle. And that's when the rumors began. One of the relief crew swore that the logs had more pages before they mysteriously disappeared. He claimed there was an entry scratched into the wood of the desk, carved roughly as if in panic. It comes from the sea. That part never made it into the official report. Others began whispering of more signals that continued days after the keepers vanished, short bursts from the lighthouse beacon that spelled nothing coherent, unless reversed. A naval signalman, reviewing records years later, claimed the reversed code translated to a single word: beneath. Still, authorities pressed on with logical explanations. It was an accident, they said. They were swept away. They panicked. But people who had served at Flannan Isle disagreed. Former keepers began to come forward with tales they'd never shared before. One described a low hum that echoed from the rocks at night, a vibration that made your teeth ache. Another spoke of dreams, vivid nightmares of drowning in the sky. And one man, a relief keeper who only lasted a week, claimed the lighthouse wasn't just on the island, it grew out of it. There's something inside, he muttered. I heard it breathing. By now the lighthouse had become legend. But legends don't explain the facts. Not the missing coat. Not the frozen clock. Not the calm seas. And not the fact that the light, that massive beacon meant to shine no matter what, never failed, unless someone turned it off. But who turned off the light? And what did they see before they did? There's one more detail that rarely gets told. In 1921, 20 years after the disappearance, a group of archaeologists visited the island to study the geology of the rock beneath the lighthouse. They drilled 3 feet down and hit hollow space. Beneath the lighthouse was not solid stone, but an underground cavern system. Unmapped, uncharted, sealed by centuries of pressure and salt. The team set up lights and a camera. On the second day, all 3 members vanished. Only their equipment was found, soaked in seawater. The footage? Blank. No images. Just 32 minutes of low, rumbling static, and a faint rhythmic knocking. Like footsteps. By now, the story of Flannan Isle had drifted beyond Scotland. Paranormal investigators, journalists, conspiracy theorists, all wanted to know what happened in the lighthouse where time stopped in 1901. But to understand what truly may have occurred, you have to go further back than 1901. Further than the lighthouse itself. Back to a time before light even touched the island. And what we found changed everything. The manuscript. In 1937, a Norse historian uncovered a Viking manuscript in a Swedish monastery. It was fragile, almost disintegrated, and it referenced a place the seafarers feared to approach. A stone fang rises from the edge of the world, a tower of winds. Time runs wild in its shadow. Men enter but none return, for it is there that the gods sealed the whispering door. Codex Flannora circa 1200 AD. Most historians dismissed it as myth. But the location described, a jagged isle west of Scotland, surrounded by turbulent sea, matched Flannan Isle almost exactly. The Vikings never built anything there. But they left behind warning stones, markers carved with ancient runes that, when translated, said, "Do not speak its name." Centuries passed. Then, in 1895, the British government commissioned the lighthouse. They brought iron, concrete, science. They didn't listen to the whispers of the islanders, who refused to set foot on the place after dark. They didn't ask why the sheep brought to graze there never returned. They simply built, straight down. The lighthouse's foundation cut deep into the island's bedrock, unknowingly drilling into something ancient. A hollow space, the same one the archaeologists would discover decades later. But the workers? They reported strange sounds as early as construction day 3. One foreman described a clock ticking, but no clock was on site. Others mentioned tools vanishing. And one, George Halley, quit on the spot after hearing what he called a knock that replied when no one knocked. Still, the lighthouse opened in December 1899. Exactly 2 years before the disappearance, the radio distortion jumped to 1972. A pair of amateur radio operators sailing past Flannan Isles picked up something strange on their shortwave receivers. Between 1:42 a.m. and 2:10 a.m., they recorded a burst of unregistered Morse code coming from what seemed to be the island. The signal? Garbled, but slowed down and filtered through audio software decades later, it revealed chilling clarity. We never left. The coordinates matched the lighthouse. The signal was never traced again. The unreported dive. In 1998, a private expedition funded by a tech millionaire, obsessed with lost time phenomena, attempted to map the underwater caverns near the island. The lead diver, Helen Morey, was an experienced cave specialist. She went down with 2 others. Only Helen returned. She surfaced shaking, blood dripping from her ears. Her final log entry, handwritten and found later in a locked bag, read, "Time isn't broken here. It's alive. And it's hungry." She never spoke again. The time loop theory. Some physicists speculate the island may lie on a temporal fault, a break in spacetime where the normal flow is distorted. Sounds far-fetched? Perhaps. Until you realize that every clock brought to the island, even digital ones, eventually fails. Some freeze. Others tick backward. A few simply blink 00:00, forever. A group of scientists in 2009 ran an experiment by placing atomic watches at 4 corners of the island. All 4 returned inaccurate time readings, differing by hours, despite being synchronized just days before. So what is it? A localized magnetic anomaly? A gravitational pocket? Or something not of this world? The voice on the recording. There is one more piece of evidence. Something never released to the public. In 2013, a documentary crew camped on the island overnight. They brought drones, seismometers, and heat scanners. Nothing unusual, until the last night. At 3:11 a.m., a camera left recording inside the lighthouse captured a sound. It wasn't wind. It wasn't footsteps. It was a whisper. A single sentence. Spoken in a voice that didn't belong to any crew member. "We told them not to build here." Followed by a loud knock, from inside the lighthouse wall. They left the next morning. 3 men disappeared in 1901. But maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they stepped into something. A loop. A fracture. Or a place that refuses to let time pass. They vanished in 1901. 3 men. Gone without a trace. And for over a century, no one has solved the riddle of the Flannan Isle Lighthouse, the tower where time stopped, and something began to wake. We've talked about the logs. The whispers. The Viking warnings. The bizarre signals. But now, it's time to face the darkest theory of all. What if the lighthouse wasn't built to guide ships? What if it was a seal, a lock, meant to keep something buried? And in 1901, the lock broke. The ritual theory. One researcher, an occult historian named Dr. Alice Ma, spent 15 years tracing records, runes, and oral legends tied to the Flannan Isles. Her findings weren't published in any peer-reviewed journal. They were buried, hidden behind NDAs and silence. But a private transcript from one of her lectures leaked in 2016. In it, she made a chilling claim. The lighthouse wasn't placed by accident. It was built on a convergence point, an ancient place of offering, where the sea meets the sky, and time can bleed. She called it a thin place, where dimensions brush against each other. The Celts believed these places were entrances. Not to heaven. Not to hell. But to the forgotten in-between. The unfound room. There's a floor in the Flannan Lighthouse that doesn't exist on any blueprint. Workers who have been there say there's a locked hatch, halfway between the keeper's quarters and the beacon. No key opens it. No tool cuts through it. One man claimed it was never there during the day, only at night, between 2 and 3 a.m. He said the hatch had a marking, a symbol that isn't in any known language. A spiral, made of 13 tiny lighthouses, pointing inward. Some believe the keepers opened it. Some believe they never meant to. The final theory, they're still inside. Here's where it gets disturbing. A time-stamped photo taken in 1994 by a birdwatcher, with no knowledge of the lighthouse's history, shows the tower silhouetted against the sun. But inside the lantern room is a shape. 3 figures. Standing. Motionless. The resolution is grainy. But people who know the case swear. It's them. Marshall. Duckett. MacArthur. But their faces are blurred. Not by the photo. But by something else. One researcher described it as a smear in reality. Like time refusing to render them. The knock. Every year, on December 15th, the anniversary of the light going out, someone knocks on the door of the Flannan maintenance station. 3 knocks. Even though no one is on the island. Even though the station has no radio, no power, and is locked for winter. The logs keep recording it. No footprints. No signs of life. Just, knocking. A message in the light. A drone team sent in 2021 to take high-resolution footage of the island caught something strange. The lighthouse beacon, long inactive, flashed for 0.8 seconds. They slowed the footage. In the briefest frame, just one. The beam reflected a message in the glass. It said, "We never left." So here we are. 124 years later. 3 men still missing. No answers. Only questions. What happened inside that lighthouse? Did they step into another realm? Or did something step out and take their place? And most terrifying of all, is time really frozen there? Or is it still ticking, just not for us? Some say the sea took them. Some say madness. Others say the island waits for someone to finish what was started. But one thing's for sure. The light went out in 1901. And it was never meant to come back on. Now it's your turn. What do you think happened on Flannan Isle? Comment below. Was it nature? The supernatural? Or something older than both? And if you ever hear a knock from a door that should be empty, don't open it.